Yeah.
Radio.
Sent text. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't even want it from your beginning. I love you. I am so uncomfortable.
Okay. What is that? Oh, it's okay. Okay, ladies, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. I forgot. On my
You know what?
okay. If you're watching us online, please say hi, hello, Art, Shavua Tov, how are you? And whoever watching us on Chabad.org, this makes it a little bit better. Okay, ready? Well, actually, let me make sure they're watching us. I didn't see any comments yet. Oh, there we go. Andrea's watching. Okay, hello, Andrea. How are you? 1 second. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Shehakol Nihiyah Bidvaro. Okay, just the audio should be better now. I just put on the Yeti microphone. Okay. So, my friends, good evening. Good evening. How are you all doing? Shavua Tov, a safe week to all of us. Hi, hello, Kim. Hello, Andrea. Exactly. It's all about Sharet. Exactly. There you go. There you go. So, tonight's class is in memory of Tzitz ben Yosef and in memory of Chaim Avram and Shlomo's yahrzeit is today. Should be an elevation. The schus of his amazing daughter. Okay. So, we're going to. Okay, ladies. So part of the joy that I have from this Monday night class is that it's not a prepared curriculum where I'm just teaching you. It's a journey. And sometimes I'm sharing things I know. And sometimes I myself am learning together with you literally. And I challenge myself to prepare more, to go deeper, to study deeper, and to find the full depth on the topic. And so that's exactly what's going to happen together tonight. We had a fascinating class last week, which created a lot of pushback and a lot of questions and challenge. It wasn't pushback. It was when you learn something like what it's good. It's good. When something is very simple, it's okay. Very nice. When something like takes you, it's a struggle. Like if you ever saw a piece of meat being cooked, right? The piece of meat being cooked is not just like chilling on taking a suntan. Sizzling and there's the fire is firing and the meat is dripping and the fat is dripping. It's a happening situation. The water is bubbling. Then it's cooking, right? If you put a piece of meat onto a frying pan and all you hear is silence, it's not good. When you hear the sizzle, so when you hear people, going, that's good. You're getting somewhere. So it's good. It's good. So Baruch Hashem, I did a lot of work on tonight's class, a lot of work. And we're going to do some fascinating things. Stay tuned. Don't go away. Good evening, everyone watching us in Sagi, New York. Hello, Ella. Hello, Ravit from Facebook land. Ravit's watching from Facebook land. Hello, Karine. Hello, Joseph. Hello, if you're watching on Chabad.org. Okay, so let's begin from the beginning. The beginning, of course, is the fact that we already established that in Jewish tradition and Jewish theology, we have a concept that the soul contains both male and female elements to the soul. The soul is not inherently male or female, just like in the very beginning of creation, when God created Adam and Eve. How was Adam and Eve created? As one entity that contained both a male and female. Then God separated the male from the female, which we discussed last week. They became two separate entities. Thus began the tension and the struggle of marriage, where the male and female has to learn to live together. But what we were primarily discussing is not so much the actual struggle of living together, but finding each other. Exactly, being able to even find who is the other half of your identity, your soulmate. And as we discussed last week, this journey of the souls together is part of it explains the need that we feel to get married, which really, from a purely logical and purely objective perspective, it's kind of unnecessary. Today women are able to take care of themselves. It's not like back in, I don't know if you call it the good old days, but back once upon a time where women were much more in need of a male to take care of them, to protect them from society, to earn money, to where it was all, where you didn't have children out of marriage. The concept of having children out of marriage didn't exist. The idea of even the person living alone was like, socially, you were an outcast of society. A person living alone, something was wrong with them. But today we live in a time where society is completely accepting, and it's very, very normal to be alone. And today it's normal to live with a person who's not your spouse and to even have children. And today, we can take care of ourselves. So you look at all the problems in marriage and look at all the challenges, it's like, what do you need it for? And yet, as we discussed last week, the joy of the marriage is a joy that's really incomprehensible. Again, from a purely intellectual perspective, the joy of a marriage, such an intense energy, such an intense emotion. Why is that? Because it's a reunion. And if you ever saw the reunion of the hostages returning to their families after such a difficult time apart from each other, and all that yearning to be reunited, and then they're finally reunited, the intensity of that reunion is tremendous. And so too, these two halves of one soul were forcibly torn apart. They've been yearning to become reconnected, to become reunited one with the other. So when that happens, the joy and the emotions and the power of the reunion, of the wedding, is tremendous. Now, all that is beautiful, it's romantic, it's gorgeous. But of course, it raises many, many questions. Primarily for those that struggle to find that other half, and they don't, look into someone's eyes and find their Rasheret, or they found someone that they thought was a Rasheret and they didn't live together too happily. It was a very short honeymoon, and then they got divorced, etc., second marriages. And so we explained a little bit from the Gemara. I didn't want to get too into the Gemara, which we're going to do tonight. The concept, I didn't give the Gemara's answer, but the concept that we have free will. And we have the ability to change our destiny to a certain extent. And therefore, even though we have a predestined mate, but we have to be living in consciousness with our soul, in tandem with our soul, to reunite with the other half of our soul. And so people make choices that are not soul aligned. It's harder to find the other half of your soul, etc. So everything I said is true, but then we're going to go much, much deeper. And it's going to be a little bit of a deeper class, but you guys are all smart and you're able to follow with me. And so we're going to start by actually reading the Gemara, which is the foundation of these ideas. If you're watching me on my page, give me a second. I'm going to open up the page before the class. Actually, I got carried away as I was preparing. There's no end for how much I can learn, go deeper and deeper and deeper. So I'm going to show you the Gemara in Saita. Now, the Gemara in Saita, why am I seeing this on my 1 second? The Gemara in Saita is talking about a woman that basically was hidden from her husband. And let's open up the page. So the Gemara is going to bring a contradiction, which we kind of referenced. We kind of already talked about it last week. But here's a contradiction. If you're watching, again, on my page, I'm opening up right now again, everyone watching from Sagi, Pennsylvania, also watching us. Those are William. Hello, how are you? Okay, so here is, where did it just go? Here's the text of the Talmud. Says Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. You have it, page 2a, the very beginning of the tractate. When Reish Lakish would introduce the discussion of the Torah passage of this sota, of this woman that had been warned by her husband not to be with another man, and she was found to be together with him against the warnings, and they would take her to the temple, the whole story. He would introduce the whole discussion of this marriage by saying, heaven matches a woman to a man only according to his actions. As it is stated, for the rod of the wickedness shall not rest upon the lot of the righteous. So this verse is basically saying, and King David is saying in Psalms, that you get what you deserve, basically. Right? The rod of wickedness will not rest upon the righteous. So if you have a wife that's straying and being unfaithful in the marriage, you're getting kind of what you deserve. You're getting what you can. Next statement to the Talmud. Rabba bar Hana, Rabba, the grandson of Hana, says that Rabbi Yochanan says that it is as difficult for God to match a couple together as was the splitting of the Red Sea. As it is stated in the verse that speaks of the exodus from Egypt, God makes the solitary individuals dwell in the house. He brings out prisoners into prosperity. And the word prosperity is bakosharos, which can also mean to be tied together like a kesher, like a knot. So here we see that when God takes two solitary individuals, before you got married, you were a solitary individual, and you were a solitary individual. And now, as I say this by almost every wedding that I do, Jewish math, what's Jewish math? 1 + 1 = 1. That's what happens under the chuppah. The two young people, the young bride and the young groom, walk into the chuppah each as a one, as an independent identity, as an independent human being, and they're going to walk out of this chuppah not as two, but as one new unit, one couple. And so this is what the verse in Tehillim is saying, that for God to make these solitary individuals into a house, to bring the prisoners out, is as difficult, because the whole verse is talking about the splitting of the sea, is as difficult for God as the splitting of the sea. Now, before I go any further, what is this saying? That our spouse and our marriage is, first we're saying it's, what's the first statement saying? It's all based on our actions. Right? That was the first statement of Shmuel Bar Yitzchak, quoting the verse about this woman that was acting inappropriately, that heaven matches a woman to a man only according to his actions. Lefi ma'asav. Lefi ma'asav means that you get a spouse based not on your bashart, not upon your soulmate, not upon the other half of your original soul. You get a spouse based on your character, your righteousness. Then we're quoting a statement that who makes marriages? Not you, Hashem. And it's very, very hard for God to make marriages. So already we have a contradiction, right? And now if we go further to the next statement in the Talmud about marriages, let's continue reading. Now we're going to go a little further. Is that so? Is it difficult for God to make marriages? Asks the Gemara. But there's another teaching from Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, who says, the famous teaching that we talked about last week, that 40 days before an embryo is formed, a divine voice issues forth and says, Bas Pleni, the daughter of so-and-so, the Bas Pleni, the Ben Pleni, the daughter of so-and-so is destined to marry so-and-so. Which would imply from this statement of Rav Yehuda, the name of Rav, that what? It's not hard for God to make marriages. They were already made 20 years before you got married. Before you even born, God already made your marriage. So we have very conflicting statements here. You guys with me so far? Good. Answers the Gemara, Loi kasha. It's not a question. I'm actually missing the line in the Hebrew, but it's fine. It's not a question. This statement, this is going to be a complicated line, so pay attention. You're going to learn how to learn Gemara. The same sentence can be read different ways. This statement is with regard to a first match, while this statement is with regard to a second match. But to quote the Aramaic words, Loi kasha, this is Zug Rishon, the first Zivug, the Zivug Rishon, not Zug, Zivug Rishon, the first union, and this is a Zivug Sheni, the second union. So how do you understand that answer? There's a plan B. Okay. Bashart number 2. Okay. So the way Rashi explains, the way the classic understanding of the Talmud is, that the first statement, the one that says, the second statement, the statement of Rav Yehuda, the name of Rav, that 40 days before an embryo is formed, God already decreed who that embryo will be, that's your first match. And then the very statement of Rabbi Barhana, that you get a spouse based upon your actions, that's referring to your second marriage. So the classic understanding of the verse is that the word Zivug Rishon, the first unity, means the first marriage. So if someone gets married and they get married young in high school and they stay married for 50 years, that's a match that was predetermined in heaven before they were born. But if, for whatever reason, that match didn't work out, then they find a match according to their personality, their character, their actions, which would be their second marriage. That would be the simple reading of the Gemara. You don't like it. I'm not going to relieve you with that. Man, it's never with a simple reading. Not here. Not if you learn Chassidus and Kabbalah. But you understand this is what the Gemara's answer is. So I just want to make sure it's clear, because now we're going to learn this Gemara properly if you want to understand the journey. So the classic understanding is that people have a zivug, rishon, a zivug sheni, a first union, a second union. The first union is between the simple marriage, so to say, the easy marriage that God can make by making announcements in heaven. That's the one that happens 40 days before we're born. And some people, they happily find their spouse when they're easy and it's young, and they grew up in the same neighborhood, they went to school together, they were matched together, and they live happily ever after. And that's the first marriage. And those that don't find it so easy, they have to work for it. That's the zivug sheni, the second union. Okay. Now, my friends, for those who don't, that's the Gemara. Before I tell you what the Arizal writes, just want to explain to you that there's already a perspective here we have to take. That marriage is not only about what was announced before you were born. We have the ability to change our destiny. Meaning, even on a simple Talmudic level, before I get to any Kabbalah, on a simple Talmudic level, what the Talmud is telling us is that we have the ability through our actions to change what God had predetermined in heaven. I mean, that's black and white in the text of the Talmud. It's not even getting Kabbalistic. So marriage is not only about what was announced before you were born, it's also about what kind of human being you become after you were born. And even your bashert, and this very much connects to what I said last week, that you could be born with a certain bashert, a certain predetermined, so to say, spouse at this point in my class, but who you are and how you behave will absolutely impact the ability to find that bashert and also the ability to live with that bashert. Because you do have people that do find their soulmate, and then even in the beginning, they feel this tremendous love and this bonding and this unity and this connection. And then what happens by 10 years later? They've stopped investing in their marriage for whatever reason. And there's a million reasons why. I mean, it's usually a few reasons, but whatever, a million symptoms. And they stopped communicating, and they stopped spending time together, and they stopped sacrificing and giving for the other. And when that happens, sometimes it's not even like if there's major fighting and they hate each other and they can't stand each other, make each other crazy. That means that they were never meant for each other. But you have many marriages that end in divorce, where even after divorce, I still like her and I still respect her. And I think she's a wonderful person. I just can't live with her. It's just not my marriage. It's not, but the bond at some level still stays, and they still feel a certain level of connection to this person because they probably do contain the same soul, but their actions didn't allow them to live together. And that's why they end up with the second marriage, because they didn't have the proper behavior to make the first marriage work. So that's all the Talmud. But now, my friends, I'm going to read to you from chapter 20 of Shar HaGilgulim, the book of reincarnation. One of my favorite books. L'chaim. We should have really said L'chaim tonight. The tea is good. Thank you for the tea. Thank you. We should have spiked it, made L'chaim. It's okay. Yes, it is. And you're welcome afterwards to take the book and to read it and to see if I made it up or if it's really what it says in here. Okay. Shar HaGilgulim is the Gates of Reincarnation, written by Rabbi Chaim Vital, who is the primary student of the Arizal. The greatest teacher of any Kabbalah in history is Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, the holy Ari HaKadosh, the Arizal, as he's known, who lived in Tzfat in the beginning of the 15th century. And the Arizal passed away extremely young, but he taught a tremendous amount of secrets. He never wrote down anything himself. His main student, Rabbi Chaim Vital, was the one that would write down his teachings. And this book of Shar, he wrote, I think, 24 gates, if I'm not mistaken. One of the gates is the Gates of Reincarnation, which was translated to English by someone. His name's somewhere here. Wherever it is. We've actually studied this entire, Pinchas Winston. We've actually studied this book, Shabbat morning over the course of years ago, but it's a great book. Okay, anyway. Before Shabbat in the morning, but this is not to read, like, you're going to get lost in this. This is not like for the uninitiated to read. You'll be very confused. Anyway, I'm not going to read the whole chapter 20, but I'm going to read parts and whatever I basically read the whole chapter, but here's the idea. Says the Arizal. It has already been explained earlier whether the judgment of reincarnation applies to women as it does to men or not. And I don't think we're going to get to this later. It might help answer about the questions about polygamy and having multiple wives. But here's what you should know. Our rabbis have said in the first chapter in Sota, regarding the verse that we just read, that God settles the solitary into family. He brings couples together into one. That there is a first and second pairing, a zivug rishon and a zivug sheni. And that which is written, that is difficult to pair them together as a splitting of the sea, is referring to the second pairing. Because the verse, not just according to your actions, why is it hard for God to, I missed one detail. Why is it hard for God to put people together? Because as we said last week, you have free choice. So God wants you to marry this person. That's, the, so to say, the plan. Again, I'm talking from a very superficial level here. Problem is, you can make your own choices. That's part of being an adult, right? We get to make our own choices. And I decide I don't want to marry anyone that has black hair. I only want blonde hair. So even though, right? I was looking at Randy. No, I'm just joking. I just made it up. But so the point is, people make these very, very, with all due respect, very foolish calculations in how they choose a person to marry. And so even though they're worthy and they're destined to a certain mate, a certain other half of their soul, but because this goes by their actions, so God finds it very difficult because we're resisting. So you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, so to say. And God created a world where God wants us to make free choices and have certain mastery over our own future, etc. And so therefore, that's understanding that it's difficult. The splitting of the sea is referring to this marriage. You should know, says the Arizal, ki ein havana zivug echad ubeis kipshutei. The explanation of this first pairing and second pairing is not according to the simple understanding. Because in many instances, the second pairings are better than the first. How many people do you know that had a terrible first marriage and a wonderful second marriage? Right? Where their first marriage was not their soulmate, and their second marriage was their soulmate. Last week I was talking about the second marriage, that was my soulmate. First one, I don't know what that was about. That was a practice run. Yeah. That's what we say when we start a game and we mess up, right? That was a practice. Now for a point. So the reality doesn't fit the simple understanding of the Talmud. Rather, the explanation will be based on what's written in the Zohar of Mishpatim. What does it say in the Zohar of Mishpatim? Basically, there is where it talks, and here's where you need my background and some information. In Mishpatim is the source in Kabbalah for the idea of reincarnation. And reincarnation is basically all the civil laws that are described in the Torah regarding a person that damaged a person's field, someone ox scored another person's ox, the fire went and burnt down someone else's field, the laws of guardians, all these things are all really, really on a deeper spiritual level based on previous lifetimes, etc. So it says there in the very beginning of Mishpatim regarding a Jewish slave that if he was married, this Jewish slave, when his time is up and he goes out of slavery, his wife goes with him. Says the Arizal, this means that when the person is reincarnated, there's other half their wife who might not need to be reincarnated. And the whole woman's reincarnation will be not for tonight, but the woman would theoretically maybe her soul's done. But because she's the other half who needs to help her male component, her husband's half, to be completed in his tikkun, she comes back to the world with him to help him finish his job. And therefore, I'm not going to read inside, but basically the Arizal is writing that the first union and second union doesn't mean the first marriage and second marriage. It means the first time these two halves of the souls come together in the first of their lifetimes. And second union means when they're both in a second lifetime. A second lifetime. That's the zivug sheni. So you existed once with your other half of your soul. You both passed away. You both now in another lifetime. And you both came back into the world together. And that's the zivug sheni. So the first time when we were together, that was a heavenly voice saying so-and-so to so-and-so. But when we come back into the world in the reincarnated form, why are we coming back? Usually because we got to fix something. Usually because our actions were not right. There's three different primary things. Again, I have to keep it a little bit simple, but very often one of the three reasons is because of our sins that destroyed part of our soul. Destroyed, wrong word. That blemished part of our soul. So therefore, now we already created negativity. We already created some blemish to our soul, some challenge to our soul being able to live in alignment. And therefore, it's hard to find the other half of your soul. This is what he writes. Know that when a man is new, that is his first time in the world, then his soulmate is born with him as it is known. When it comes time to marry her, they make it possible to do it quickly, free of any trouble whatsoever. However, if the man committed a sin and needs to reincarnate because of it, that's what is the verse about going out of slavery with his wife. His soulmate will also reincarnate, returning for his benefit. When it comes time to marry her, in heaven, the forces of impurity, Gesundheit, don't make it so easy for him to do so quickly, but only after much trouble. Since he returned because of sin, there are accusers who want to prevent her from him, causing them to fight. That's why it says that it's as difficult to pair them as the splitting of the sea, because this is the second pairing. And they were already paired together in another lifetime, but now in this reincarnation, the second pairing. But there's obstacles in the way, and that's why it's very difficult. And that's why it goes to explain why sometimes a man marries a woman quickly, but then only after the marriage, then they start to fight and to argue, or the other way around, sometimes they're married and they achieve peace and tranquility. And know that if after they marry they achieve peace and tranquility, that she is indeed his soulmate, and that is the second pairing. If she was not a soulmate, there would not be peace after he married her, etc. Yes.
I was just wondering if a woman reincarnates, even if she doesn't need to, for on behalf of the pairing that she had in the previous one, does it work the other way? Does a man go back if the woman needs to do it?
So excellent question. And here's where I'm in a little gray area where I've been thinking a lot. I don't have clarity, black and white. And so I want to be a little careful how I say, let me not answer your question right now. How's that? I've thought about it. I have a theory, but I don't have proof to it, and I don't want to get derailed by it. So after the class, we can talk about more, baby. Yes.
Could a man come back as the woman and the woman?
No. So the man can come back as a woman. No. Because basically, let's just clarify something here. Even the premise of your question has a flaw, which is the woman doesn't come back as herself. The body of the woman is herself. The soul is a part of a larger soul. The life force of the woman, the soul is only a part of the whole soul. So when you're coming back for your husband, I'm like, I'm coming back for someone else. The husband is a part of you. It's all the same. Now, what's the primary part of the soul? What's secondary? But the point is that there's a part of the soul that requires tikkun. You have to understand just something in general. I don't get too into class on reincarnation now. This was like a 2.5-hour class or a 3.5-hour class. How long was it? I don't remember. You were here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like 3.5 hours. Yeah, that was my longest class ever. Like straight for 3.5 hours. Shavuos night. So I don't want to go into all that now, but the point is that when you have your soul's not like so black and white. It's not like a physical. It's not like here's a cup, and there was 8 ounces or maybe 10 ounces in here, and now there's about 2 ounces left. And you take we're talking about souls as ethereal. It's fire. Fire is not, So souls go through multiple parts, and there's aspects of the soul need to be refined, aspects that are already finished in their journey. So the parts that are coming back are the parts that need tikkun. And that's where there's struggle, because I'm going through a tikkun. I'm going through a rectification. And part of the rectification is going to be the struggle I'm going to have with my other half of my soul in the struggle that I'm going to face in my life. Okay. Okay, everyone that's watching, I'm looking at the questions. Okay, well, good. Okay, now, so that's what the Arizal writes. It's fascinating. And the point is that the second marriage is not automatically plan B, which is what Randy said before. The second one, it says in the Talmud, second marriage. It doesn't say the word marriage. It doesn't say the word marriage. It's a second union, second pairing. It doesn't say the second marriage. It says zivug. Rishon and zivug. It's a very strange word. Zivug means a union, a pairing. So the second pairing just means the second time you're in this world at the same time. Now, to get to that time, it may be you had to go through a practice run. You may have been challenged by forces of unholiness that distracted with a very beautiful girl that was really not for you, and et cetera, until eventually you found the one that was for you. So yes, it was a second chronologically, like in this lifetime, but it was only the real marriage that was meant to be the other half of your soul. That and the mistake that we all make mistakes. To finding that person who is the other half of my soul, and that would be the zivug sheni, the second union of us living in the second lifetime. And that's it's beautiful. It's beautiful. That's what that result writes, and that's the result writes. Which means that sometimes the second pairing is like, and that's what he writes. I kind of just went a little fast. The whole struggle in the marriage is because you're going through a tikkun. The fact that you're struggling in the marriage doesn't mean that it's not your soulmate. If you remember, I already said this last week, that happiness, I know in America, happiness is all that matters in life. But in authentic living, happiness is not the proof either of living with your soulmate or not living with your soulmate. Because you can be with your soulmate and not be happy. And it's a struggle to be happily married. And it requires work and commitment and investment and focus to have a happy marriage. That doesn't mean it's not your soulmate. It means you got to work because you were in the second union. Today, all of us are on our 200th. I don't know. I'm saying we've been reincarnated many, many times. We're already 6,000 years into this story. So we've been around a few times. We're on union number 20. I don't know. Again, I'm making up the number. But we've done this many times. So there's a lot of resistance for whatever reason. So finding your soulmate will have resistance. And so the fact that you're not happy, you're struggling, you're fighting, it's just because there's forces of opposition that are trying to pull you apart from being able to find completion and wholesomeness in your life. Just like as I said last week, that if you find something you are happy with, but they're not the other half of your soul, just because you're happy doesn't mean that you're living with your soulmate. So this is the whole idea of the struggle that comes where it's according to your actions, there's difficulty of the splitting of the sea. Marriage is difficult. When? In later unions, in later lifetimes where there's blemishes and obstacles that come to hold us back. Okay, so now we come to some of the questions that were asked last week. Some of the questions were, so can you lose your soulmate? What if someone takes your soulmate? Someone marries your soulmate, right? That was, I remember you asked, someone asked, if you take your soulmate, like what happens if you don't find it? Are you never going to get married now because someone married your soulmate? So now you're destined to live alone? And what about, can you lose your soulmate? Can you never find them if you don't act properly? What happens to them? What if they're not worthy, but you're looking, but they're not looking? They're takes two, right? So you can think that you're very righteous, but they're not on a level of righteousness. And now what happens? So you're stuck because they're not ready. So then we had a question about, can the person have more than one soulmate? Can they marry more than one wife? Now, can they? They could marry more than one wife. King David had 18 wives. So how does that work? That was, I think, David's question. So, he wants 18 wives.
Does everybody have a soulmate?
Does everyone have a soulmate? Yeah. Okay. Very good question. Also, does everyone have a soulmate? You have only one soulmate. Can it change? So let's start with: can you change your soulmate? What's the answer to that question? Can you change your soulmate? Only Hashem can change your soulmate. Marsha started saying no, and then she decided to play it safe and be quiet.
No, but your actions can change whether you're worthy or not.
So, what do you guys say before I go any further? I'm watching online. I'll give you 30 seconds. What do you say? Can you change your soulmate? So at first you would think, like Marsha said, oh, no, because it's a soulmate. It's predestined. God already announced it before you were born. That's only regarding your first time in this world. We already stated explicitly, not explicitly, but we already made it clear that you end up marrying according to your actions. It's not like you have no free choice. That was the founding question of last week's class was, if I'm predestined to marry this person, then where's my free choice? You can change your soulmate, which means that through working on yourself, you can become better and you can become worthy of a better soulmate or a better half to help you in your journey of tikkun. And the other person, maybe if they're not worthy, they lose you and you end up with someone righteous, someone proper at your new level. And that person that may have been your other half in a previous lifetime is no longer going to be your half now because you've gone up to here, they stayed here.
So that explain some divorces?
Could explain some divorce, yeah, where they grow apart. But once you're married, you're kind of already together. So it could be possible. I didn't think about that, but perhaps they got married and they were aligned on the soul level. Yeah, it could be that over the course of marriage, I've seen this happen. I know divorce happening now where that happened, where one became, that wasn't the only issue, obviously, but one became much more religious and one stayed the way they were when they got married 20 years ago or however many years ago it was. Said, I didn't, I don't, that's not, well, I didn't sign up for this. I want to tell you a story. A very, very famous story. You all know the story. The story of, no, before we're going to get to that story soon. That's even more exciting. The story of, Jacob and Leah. It says in the Torah that the eyes of Leah were red. Why were they red? Exactly. Leah's eyes were, I was going to try to find the text and put it in. I was having a problem with it, whatever. But you all know the story. Leah's eyes were red and tender from crying so much. Why was she crying so much? She knew that she was destined to marry Esau, the wicked brother Esau. And people said, Rivka has two sons. Esau is the older one and Yaakov. And her brother Lavan has two daughters. Leah is the older one and Rachel is the younger one. So Leah's going to marry, the older will marry the older, the younger will marry the older, and predetermined, predestined. And what happened? Leah prayed and cried and davened, and she changed her bashert. Was Yaakov not married to his soulmate when he married Leah? Leah was meant for him. He gave birth to the children of the tribes. The majority of the 12 tribes of Israel are born from Leah and Yaakov. So even though at the beginning of Leah's story, she was, so to say, meant to be together with Yaakov, with Esau, she changed it.
Which that was probably her first reunion.
That may be the first time. That may be true. But the point, yes, that's actually a good point. But the point that I wanted to take out from this story, that we all can take from this story, is that we are not limited to what we were born to. She was born into hello, good evening. She was born into a reality where she was meant to be married to Esau. And she said, I'm not accepting that reality. I'm not accepting that. And she changed her destiny to no longer be destined for Esau, but to be destined for Yaakov. And I'm going to get back. I don't know if I'm going to get back to it. I'm not going to have time. But so I'll just say this one point now. Yaakov, when he married two women, was only one of them his soulmate? Yaakov's soul was able to find completion on an external revealed level through Leah, a deeper, more spiritual, internal, pneumistic level through Rachel, which is why Leah is compared to speech. Rachel is silent, Rachel is thought. Rachel is a more deeper level, which is why only 2 of the 12 tribes are from Rachel. The majority of the tribes are from Leah. That's why of the tribes, specifically Binyamin and Yosef, who were the leaders of the Jews in exile, come from Rachel, whereas Yehuda, the king of the Jews in the time of revealed good for the Jews, comes from Leah. If you followed me, great. If you didn't, it's fine. The point is that they also had a job, but the primary leaders of the Jewish people, one second, the primary leader of the Jewish people is Yehuda and Binyamin, who's the king Shaul, comes from Binyamin, and Yosef, who took care of the Jews in Egypt. And the point is, I don't want to get lost in this because I had something. There's more to this, but the point is that Yaakov's soul had a intimate bonding and connection with Leah on a revealed level that gave birth to revealed leaders of the Jewish people. Yaakov's soul bonded on the bashert level, on the soulmate level, with the soul of Rachel that gave birth to those who would lead us in times of exile. Yosef and Binyamin, Mordechai comes from Binyamin, Shaul, King Saul comes from Binyamin, etc. The point is, here's the point. We know a story, we all know the story, of a young woman that was destined, her original plan was to marry Esau, and through crying, she changed it. And she became the soulmate. She went up in level, and she became the soulmate of someone much greater, of Yaakov. So the question was, can you lose your soulmate, or can you change your soulmate And the answer to both those questions is absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. Which can mean that you could have been born into a second lifetime, and your soulmate could have been born in a second lifetime. But that soulmate kept on becoming holier and striving and changing his or her actions, becoming more righteous. And now the other spouse is, so to say, not or declining, which is a natural state if you're not growing. And now one of the people ends up they're not aligned for each other. Their souls are no longer going to be soulmates. Because what's the idea of the tikkun, that they're each going to help each other? So now one gets a much higher soul as a new soulmate, which explains a very interesting ruling in the Talmud. I mentioned this last week. I'm going to quote it to you in the Talmud of Meikata. And it says that even during the times of the year when you're not allowed to do weddings because it's a sad time of the year, for example, in a few weeks we'll start the Sfiras Omer, the counting of the Omer. During the Omer, we don't do weddings, etc. Okay, but you are allowed to engage a woman, to betroth her, to make the engagement. Why? Because we're worried if you don't do now, someone else will take her. What do you mean someone else will take her? She's your bashert. She's destined for you. She's yours. How can someone else steal her? And yet the Talmud is saying clearly you could. And in fact, take it a step further, look at this one line of the Talmud of Maya Katan. Very interesting line. The Talmud says, the Gemara asks, and the Shmuel actually say that another person will come first to take the wife that you wanted to marry during the time of the counting of the Omer, or during the 3 weeks, before Tisha B'Av. And the Gemara answers basically, yeah. Rather, perhaps another man will come and betroth her first by means of praying for divine mercy. What does it mean he'll betroth her first by praying? You don't betroth a woman by praying. How do you betroth a woman? By praying or by giving her a ring? By getting down one knee, by asking her, will you marry me? The Talmud is saying, it's quoting, that by a man praying for divine mercy, he's going to change the bashert. So yes, it's true that maybe last year this woman was destined with this man. But that man didn't work to be worthy of this woman. And another man has been praying for divine mercy, and now that man has become worthy of this other half. So yes, you can lose your soulmate if you don't earn it and work for it and keep it. And yes, we can change our own soulmate. Even if we're destined for someone maybe not as great, we can become better and we'll be destined for a better, more worthy other half to our lives. And obviously, from the positive, you can see the negative, but you can also decline. And you could have started Zivuk Sheni, second union, as Arizal explained, the second lifetime in this world, or a 20th lifetime in this world, originally with a higher quality, a higher level, other half to your soul from where you were from a previous lifetime. But if you allow yourself to lose touch with your soul, to decline, and not to maintain the level of righteousness that you should be having to be worthy of this other soul, then you can lose it. Yes, now I'll take your question.
Okay, so are there different types or levels of bashert, since one was revealed and one was eternal? Like it was more.
Yeah, so that's just on the level of Yaakov's soul. Again, Yaakov had a tremendous soul with tremendous potential, tremendous divine capacity. And on that level of his soul, he's able to have more than one, not only he was able to, he needed to have more than one wife to fully bring out all the 12 tribes. One woman wouldn't have been enough to create the diversity of the 12 tribes that Yaakov had to create to sustain and to give birth to Jewish people. So
Does that hold in other situations, like, whether it's
So yeah, so you're jumping ahead to can we have more than one wife, which is a polygamy question. And I have to admit that was the hardest part to. I didn't find what I'm going to say written clearly, so it's kind of my own. And I've been thinking about this. I've really been thinking about this. I want to get to the Alshach, but I'm just jumping ahead because you're asking me. No, because so basically, it would seem that like someone like Yaakov, where it says explicitly that there were multiple components to his soul that met that united with different women, meaning Yaakov and Leah had a soul bond that created one part of the Jewish people. And Yaakov and Rachel had a soul bond. And even the other two wives, Bilhah and Zilpah, also had a soul bond. They became his wives. They gave birth to, they weren't just like entertainment. They were mothers of the Jewish people. That means that they were deeply bound to him. Their souls united. It's what we talked about last week, right? The whole idea of the reunion of your soul to create children. So they all so Yaakov had a very, very holy soul that was able to have, not only needed to have, more than one wife, as opposed to Avram and Yitzchak, who were very like one-dimensional. They had the one wife that was exactly that gave birth to their children. So I would posit to say that in early generations where the souls were greater and there was more capacity, there was more for the soul to refine and rectify. The soul could have more than one partner in this journey of tikkun, of rectification. But in today's time, Judaism no longer advocates for one marriage. We don't have men marrying more than one woman according to Jewish law today, because today our souls are much more focused on specific things that need to be the last things. Our souls don't have that kind of divine capacity for multiple divine missions simultaneously. So today it's one-on-one. This is my own answer. Okay. There's one more thing I want to talk about regarding on this verse, and this is going to take us to King David. So in this verse about Leah's eyes being soft and tender because she cried, we have an amazing teaching. Well, I'll just make it simple. Everything I said is from the Alshich. And Alshich is a very, very, very famous rabbi, the Moshe Alshich, who was actually the teacher of Chaim Vital, who is not a student of the Rizal. It's a very fascinating story. He was a student of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Yosef Karo had a dream that one of his students should be the one to give the sermon in the shul on Shabbat instead of him, the teacher, the rabbi, Rabbi Yosef Karo, famous Beis Yosef. So he made the student, Moshe Alshich, give the sermon, and he was one. And every week he would give the sermon. So he explained everything I just said to you now, aside for about the multiple soulmates, is from him. So basically, we can change it, etc., etc. And there's one more point now. Here's the last and very important point I want to make for tonight's discussion. We just established that you can lose your soulmate. You can change your soulmate. But the same way that you can lose your soulmate, you can also get them back. Following this, Carmen? Pay attention. A person loses their soul, happens to the other. Asav could have been someone's. Yeah. So basically, the person lost their soulmate. Let me answer, Rabbi, tell me if this answers your question. And I'll go through. I see a lot of questions here. Such a lot of questions. I'll look at them afterwards. Let me finish this. Person was born in the Zivug Sheni with a soulmate. They sinned. And their soulmate ascended, became elevated, worked on themselves. And someone else also worked on them, not you, another man, and he became worthy, or vice versa. A woman became, and now your other half is married to somebody else. You lost it. What we see from here is that it's still not too late. You can still get your other half back. You can still get your other half back, but only in the right time. This brings us to another fascinating and famous story, the story of King David and Bathsheba. You know the story? King David, we'll say it in quick. It's a pretty interesting story. King David is a married man, a married king, and he's in his palace roof. And one day he looks out from the roof, and what does he see? A young married woman, her name is Bathsheba, is bathing naked on her rooftop. Somehow he sees, and there's literally 1,000, not 1,000, but there's many explanations of the story. We've done a whole class on the story. But here's the story. He sees her, he falls in love with her, he brings her to the palace. At that time, her husband, Uriah, was out in war. And by Jewish law, before a man goes to war, they write a get, a divorce. It's a whole discussion if it's a conditional get or if it's an actual get, they'll be retroactively annulled if he comes back. But either way, he had written her a get before he went to war. He's not home. He takes her to his palace. And then she comes to him, I guess a few months later, says, I have news. I took a pregnancy test. You know, that goes, right? So King David calls Uriah back from the palace, from the war front, tells him to go home to Bathsheba. He doesn't want to go home. He does an act of treason before the king. He disobeys the king who told him to go home. He said, I refuse to go home when my master, who is Yoav, who is the general, he refers to the general as his master in front of the king, is out in the fields, now I'm going to go home. And King David, after 2 nights of refusing, he goes back, and King David sends order that he should be put into a place where he'll be killed. And after he's killed, David marries Bathsheba. What happens after that? Nathan Hanavi, Nathan the prophet, comes to rebuke King David. He gives him a whole parable about a man, rich man that had guests coming. And so he needed food. So he went to his poor neighbor who had only one single little sheep, and he took the sheep for his guests. So to yet otherwise, he took Uriah's one sheep, etc. And David readily accepts ownership for his improper behavior. And for the rest of his life, he fasts and sins to make up for them. Now, I want to tell you something fascinating. First of all, the Gemara famously says in Shabbos that whoever says David sinned is making a mistake. And there's many discussions as to how what he did was legally right and ethically right, etc. I want to give you the deepest explanation for the story. Based on a clear black and white statement, not from Kabbalah, from the Gemara. Says the Gemara, my friends, join me in reading from Sanhedrin, Talmud Sanhedrin, page 107a. Darash Rava taught. What is the meaning of that which is written? I am ready to stumble, and my pain is always before me. But the word letzela, and here you have to know Hebrew a little bit. If you're reading the Hebrew, the word tzela, anyone knows where that that word sounds familiar? King David, Adam and Eve. I don't know how much in front of me, but Eve was built from the rib, the tzela that he took from the same word. The rib of Adam is this tzela. So when it says in the verse, Ki ani letzela nochein, that I am ready to stumble, my pain's before me, who's the tzela? Who is the girl? Who is the lady taken from the rib of, in that case of Adam and Eve was Eve, but from the rib of King David? Bathsheba. Says the rabbis, Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, was designated as fit for David from the 6 days of creation. He was the other half of her soul. He was from her rib. But she came to him with mach'oiv. My pain is before me always. She came to him through pain. And similarly, the school of Rabbi Shmuel taught, another rabbi taught similarly, that Bathsheba was fit for David. They were basherts. They were soulmates. But he partook of her before she was ripe. Fascinating. What does that mean? So the analogy is a very beautiful analogy, actually. Imagine you see a grape on the vine, but you don't have patience to wait till the grape ripens and becomes ready to pick. You take it before it's ripe. You know what will happen? You eat the grape before it's ready, you're going to get a stomachache. It's going to be sour. Eat a banana before it's ripe. Banana's yours. I see a banana. It's my banana. It's my coconut. It's my mango, right? Mango tree's coming soon. So it's my mango. But if you take the mango when it's still small and hard, it's not edible. And you probably get a stomachache from eating a hard. Exactly. But Bathsheba was David's soulmate, which would explain why David felt such an intense longing and yearning for her. They saw a pretty woman. He didn't see any pretty woman before. He didn't have access to pretty woman. His wife Michal was also gorgeous. She was the daughter of King Saul. Wasn't he was physically attracted to a woman? There was a deep spiritual bond. And actually, the rabbis tell us that based on the verse that she is from his tzela, she was destined to him from the beginning of creation. And that's why whoever says that David sinned is making a mistake, because he didn't take a random person. He didn't just steal someone's wife. He took his soulmate. But the very next line, the very next line is, and Nathan rebuked him. What was his mistake? He took his soulmate before she was ripe, before it was his time. And this is a whole explanation in the Arizal that I'm not going to have time to read inside now. But basically, when a person has to go through struggle to find their soulmate, God orchestrates very complicated paths and stories and details that we go through to eventually come to our soulmate. You got to allow the journey of life to take its journey. You got to trust the process. And you got to allow and trust that when God says this is the way that it's going to go, then that's the way it's going to go, and you follow that. You go step by step, whatever God designs and designates for you to go on. That's how you go. And King David's mistake was he jumped the gun. He took this woman that was his soulmate. He took her before he was supposed to take her. Before he was supposed to take, while she was still married. And I have to find the source that you get your woman not through unethical behavior, not through rushing it, but when God says that it's time. God makes a soulmate, and so you have to wait for the time to come. And that's the point. So, can a person have more than one soulmate? Theoretically, I don't know if today if you could, but theoretically, a person can have more than one person who's deeply bound with his soul to help him or her. But it's usually the woman, I know some women are like this, in the completion of the soul of her husband, which is why it says that a person will come back into this world again and again, not because they're missing something, but because the other half of their soul is missing something. And in order for that other half of the soul to finish its journey in this world and do whatever tikkun, whatever rectification needs to make, it needs to be whole, which is why we need marriage to make us whole people. Without marriage, we're missing a half of our identity. And that could also maybe be, I'm just thinking aloud, that today maybe people are almost finished from their soul journey, that they're actually comfortable being alone, and maybe they are alone, because all part of God's plan. Because the other half of the soul is so finished, it's so like it's such a small thing to do. The other half of the soul doesn't come back for whatever is left to do. In general, we believe that today we're back in this world for very, very small things. Some of the greatest challenges. Sometimes, I'll just bring it to someone today about construction. You know what the hardest part of construction is? The very last finishes. The last finishes are the hardest part. Yeah, the easiest part when you're demoing and you're building the trenches and you're putting in foundations, they got a floor plan, they got you got an architectural thing, you go doing this many feet, that's the easy part. The more you get to the finishes, and the last finishes, the last piece of this and the last light fixture, the last thing, somehow that's where you never finish. Behind Aron Kodesh, there's still no baseboard because we didn't finish inside Aron Kodesh. Those are the things. There's still no lights in the social. There's the smallest little thing, like the baseboard by the side of the Aron Kodesh, could become the hardest things to finish. And so that's the story of our souls today. And so that's maybe I'm totally just making it up as I'm thinking, but perhaps because none of you sitting in this room are single, and maybe that's why God made it that way. But the point is, what do we really need to take from this? That we, even though yes, we have a destined bashert, a destined soulmate, how we find that soulmate, and even who will be that soulmate, is directly up to us, how we behave and how in sync with our soul we live. And the more aligned we are with our soul, the more we elevate our soul, the more we become worthy of a greater soulmate. And if our other half is not worthy, then they get left behind. And if they were worthy, we got to work to be worthy of them. So they got to work to be worthy of our other half of our soul. And therefore, if someone's looking and they haven't yet found that soulmate, yes, you should go on J dating. Yes, you should go to singles event. But besides that, you know what you should do? You got to work on yourself, because making your soul more worthy and more prepared to unite spiritually, to merge and to blend with its other half, it's going to make you much more able, when that moment comes, to be able to actually mesh and to live together in harmony. And the same thing, someone's living together with their soulmate, and they find struggles and they find challenges. So yes, maybe marriage counseling is a great idea and all that, but learning how to live in alignment with your soul and recognize, two things. First of all, living in alignment with your soul allows your soul to shine forth more and to create a soul bond, which is deeper than any physical bond you'll have with your spouse. The deepest bond that will keep you going through everything is a soul bond. If you work on that soul bond, then the rest will go easier. In addition to that, even there's a struggle, to recognize the struggle is part of the whole purpose. To find, just because someone's destined for you doesn't make it easy. It's as difficult as the splitting of the sea. Why? Because we're not in our first lifetime anymore. This is none of us are living a Ziva Grisha. We're not living our first unions. We're in the second, third, fourth, fifth, 20th time that we're back in this world. And therefore, there's challenges and there's blemishes from other times that we need to be fixing and refining and elevating. And therefore, there's challenges and there's obstacles that unholy forces put into the perfection and completion of our soulmates to live together in harmony. And just knowing that gives you a certain inner strength to not be distracted or discouraged by the temporary challenges and be able to focus on the true inner happiness that comes from truly living in sync with your soulmate. I, Baruch Hashem, I'm blessed, thank God, to have. Anyway, that, my friends, is a story of soulmates. Thank you. You have a question? Okay, there's like 400 questions. Not 400, but yeah. Yeah. What's it?
Women always come back as women and men always come back as men.
So let me ask. Let me ask. The question was: does a woman always come back as a woman? Does a man always come back as a man? Thanks for the hard question. What's your premise? Do you think that that the soul of a woman comes into a man's body? Is that what you're asking?
No. I'm asking, does the woman who has to help the man fulfill his mission?
That's what it says in that reason.
Right.
I didn't want to go there and get too distracted on this whole idea, but that's what it says. The woman's reincarnation is for the man. Meaning, I want to say something. I was thinking about this. I know Michelle's gonna I want to say something. We just take for granted. We say that there's two halves of soul and they split. Who said it's a split to 50-50? We just take it for granted that there's the male half and the female half, two halves. There's a primary how you define the soul, and then there's a feminine energy that completes it. You have Zohar 6, and Malchus is the completion. Again, I'm a little out of my league, and I haven't seen this so explicitly, but it's definitely not a split to 50-50. That's for sure not. So, in answer to your question, if you can finish it, maybe I'm cutting you off. But the journey is not like it's a soul journey. It's not like that's what many people say. It's not like there's a man's journey, a woman's journey. There's a soul's journey. And the soul's journey is going to have males and females that are part of that journey, allowing that soul, just like the soul's going to have multiple people in the course of the soul's lifetime, that will be part of its tikkun, part of its rectification. Some of those will be men, some will be women.
Like we all come back and I could have been your sister then, but now I'm your mother. And I thought that's
so generally speaking, it says that the souls remain connected. So me and you are connected in this lifetime. There's a good chance we're connected in the previous lifetime, etc. And that's why certain people feel a natural bond with certain people, because the souls already know each other. Me and you, our souls are already connected in some way from a previous time. I don't know exactly how or whatever. But if you were born as a woman now, that means that you were born with a feminine energy of the overall mission of the soul. Doesn't make sense from a Jewish perspective to say that that somehow a woman's soul ended up in a man's body, and that somehow there's a mistake. That doesn't really.
No, that wasn't what
Yeah.
I was saying. I was saying, like,
But I should say, a man could have feminine energy to him. There could be men that are very feministic, and there could be women that are very, tomboys, right? Tom girls, tomboys, whatever, which is totally normal. Because it's not like I'm a woman, so I'm a woman's soul. I'm a woman of a larger soul. And I'm a man of a larger soul. The soul has multiple components, multiple parts to it. We're each carrying a part of one of 600,000. There's only 600,000 souls to begin with. To begin with, only 600,000 souls. How many Jews are alive today? 16 million, whatever it is, 17 million, whatever the exact number is. So we're all parts of, one, not one, I'm saying 600,000. But so obviously you can have a woman or a man that has a feminine energy. This man's very feminine. That could be because he's part of the soul. It's not like, black and white. It's not physical. It's ethereal. It's spiritual. Make sense to you? Answering your question? No, I'm not sure if I understand your question then. Okay, let's look on Facebook for a second. So all the bachelors on Facebook. Mike, 61. Was Yaakov punished from hiding? Dina, very good question, Mike. I don't know the answer. I started touching on it a little bit. Dina is punished, yes, because even though Leah somehow managed, I don't know exactly, but somehow, I thought about this. The fact that Leah was able to, she was not meant for Asa, but then Asa became better. Dina was, yeah. I don't know. Someone asking about Dina. I don't know. I didn't think it through. The thought popped in my head, but I didn't really go further with this. I don't know. The person loses their soulmate. What happens to the other half of the soulmate? I think we answered that question. I think. Some people never marry. And then they don't search well enough. Oh, I want to say a story. Oh, too late now. Who wants to hear a story? Okay. If you're still watching, oh, raise your hand. So someone asked a question which that I have in my notes. Okay. So for those who are still watching, I'll tell you a story if you want. Because someone asked a question. Alice asked a question about some people never marry. So they don't find their soulmate. They're born disabled. Or they die young. So what's the soulmate? What's the reason why? So thank you for all those. I appreciate the class. I appreciate all the kind comments. So the story that actually I was going to say, I just didn't write it down because I print whatever. There was a young man who lived in Poland. He lived in Egypt. A genius of a man. For whatever reason, ended up going to Poland. And when he was in Poland, he met a girl from a very, very wealthy family, very rich man, who wanted to find a very big scholar for his daughter. And there was a very interesting thing that an Egyptian boy who was a big scholar who ended up in Poland, he was a big scholar, and this father was looking for a scholar for his daughter, met this guy, and they ended up making a shidduch. He promised a huge dowry, and this man was a genius. And they made up a date. The family went to Egypt for the wedding, this Polish family. And after the wedding, the girl stayed in Egypt with her husband and her husband's family, and the parents went back to Poland. Several months later, and there was a huge dowry, I think of 40,000 golden rubles, the Poland, whatever, like a huge dowry. He was a very wealthy man. He wanted a big scholar for a son-in-law. Several months go by, and this young bride passes away. The young man is heartbroken. His wife, they married 3 months, she passed away. A few weeks later, to make it much worse, he gets a letter from his father-in-law that his father-in-law wants the dowry back. Why? Because according to Jewish Rabbeinu Tam, who was an Ashkenazi rabbi who lived in France in the 12th century, gave a ruling that a man does not inherit his wife's assets until after 1 year of marriage. That's a ruling of Rabbeinu Tam. So normally a man inherits everything from his wife. But if they were married for less than a year, he doesn't inherit her. And that's the ruling by Ashkenazi rulings from Rabbeinu Tam. It's not in the Talmud, but from a later. Rabbeinu Tam is also one said we can't marry more than one woman. He made many such restrictions. Rabbeinu Tam was one said many that became accepted in the Ashkenazi world, not in the Sephardi world. So this was one of his decrees about marriage, that you only inherit your wife after a year. So because this girl was a Polish girl, an Ashkenazi girl, the ruling of the Ashkenazi communities is that the husband doesn't inherit his wife until after a year. He wants the dowry back. The groom speaks to his rabbis, tell him who cares where she comes from. You live in Egypt, and in Egypt the rules of Rabbeinu Tam were never accepted as binding upon the Egyptian community. We don't need to follow your rulings. We're not doing it. So he said, back and forth, whatever. So eventually the father of the girl travels to Egypt to go see what he can do to get his money back. And he comes to Egypt. First thing he does is go to his daughter's grave to visit his daughter's grave. Then he comes to the rabbis that don't know to give it to him. And so actually the Maharshal, who was, or Shlomo Luria, was related to Rabbi Yitzchak Arizal, who lived in Poland, was a Ashkenazi rabbi, told him to go to the Arizal. Because he went to the Egyptian rabbis, and the Egyptian rabbis told him, sorry, we're in Egypt. Who cares where the money came from? You got to go where the money is now. Money now is in Egypt, in a Sephardi family. Doesn't have to go back. So once he was already in Egypt, based on the advice of the Marshal, if I'm not mistaken, was the uncle or something, and somebody's related, also the last name Luria. He went to travel to Tzfat from Egypt to go to the Arizal, who's considered like both worlds. The Arizal was actually originally Ashkenazi, but he lived in the Sephardi community. He was very revered among the Sephardi. He understood both worlds to try and see if he could help. He comes to the Arizal, he tells the Arizal the whole story, and the Arizal told him, leave the money with the groom. Anyone asks you why, including my uncle, the Marshal, tell him that this is what it says in the Zayar on the verse Ve'ela HaMishpatim, which I already mentioned earlier, about all the civil laws of damages and of guardians and of lost objects, etc., that are described in Zohar. It comes from this. This is the source where I'm telling you a ruling that the money should stay with the groom's family. Okay. Later, after he left, they told the students, they wonder was this story. So he told the students, there was once, here's a story about this guy that passed away, this girl that passed away, and her husband. There were once two very good friends who went on business together. They were traveling on business. And as they were traveling on the ship, one of them either lost his money was stolen, he lost everything he had. And now he's traveling a far journey. They didn't have a single penny. So his friend who was traveling with him lent him all of his money. He should be able to buy what he needed. And he said, when you get back, you sell it and you'll pay me back, etc. They came back and they ended up moving apart. And this friend that had borrowed the money, a large sum of money that saved him his business and saved him that he shouldn't be destroyed it, and he had borrowed, but ended up never paying back the money. They both pass away. They come to heaven, and this blemish is sitting on his soul that he borrowed this huge amount of money, never paid it back, and the guy saved his life, his business, and never repaid him. So he's determined to have to come back to this world in order to make up this mistake from a previous lifetime. And this girl from Poland, this is why God made it, that even though he was from Egypt and she was from Poland, this girl from Poland was the person that had borrowed the money and then never paid it back. And therefore she came back to this world just to be born into a very wealthy family, just in order to take the money of her family to give it back to this person that had lost the money. What?
Was she a businessman in the first life, and then she came back as a
Interesting. She was a businessman. Yes. Because, yes, this soul was a businessman, and now this soul came back as a girl, a wealthy girl, again, in a woman's body with feminine energy. But yes, it's part of one larger soul, has male and female components. But the point is, that's why she passed away. As soon as she brought the money to the marriage, 3 months later, she passed away. So the question, people die young, and we don't know anything. Understand? People disabled, they die young for whatever reason. There's a master plan to the universe, and we are living. We're in so many different levels of unions. So much has to be fixed up that's in short anyway the explanation. Okay, so yes, and those 600,000 souls that someone's asking, they split multiple times, like fire that splits, and the fire keeps on growing into more and more fires. Anyway, thank you all very, very much. Laila Tov. Thank you, Kareem, for saying you want to hear the story. I'm glad you got to hear it. Good night, everyone. Next week, I have no idea what next week's class is. Maybe something over Pesach, I guess, right? We'll figure something out. Okay. Laila Tov, everyone. Good evening, Carmen. Good evening, Shira. Good evening, Christine. Good evening, Malka Levy. Good evening, Kareem. Good evening, everyone. Okay, Lori, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed. Jillian, thank you. Carmen, yes, good stuff, Carmen, huh? William, how are you? Baruch Hashem. Okay. Laila Tov, my friends, in the stream.